Okay, welcome to the Aether TST for September 6th. We can get started with the deployment brigade update by Andy.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I just have a quick update this time. So the major thing that happened in the deployment brigade is that AJ submitted a great revision to the Ether in a Box documentation, both like the normal Ether in a Box and also Ether in a Box with hardware radios. And the goal, he can talk more about it, but I'll just summarize. The goal was to make the process for a user less error prone, to try to avoid some of the common mistakes that we're seeing by making it really clear what are the different paths that you can take and kind of separate them out so that you just walk one path and you don't have to like jump around in the documentation to try to figure out what to do next, given like you're deploying 4G or 5G. And he also added a section clarifying the Ether in a Box with 5G radio deployment, which is something that we had been lacking. So that's really great. And AJ, I don't know, is there anything else that I missed there that you want to highlight?
No, I think you summarized it well, Andy. Yeah, let's get the feedback from the people now.
Yeah. Yeah. So thanks a lot to AJ for putting in all of the work to improve the documentation significantly. And then the only other item I had was that Daniel at CPQD was having difficulty deploying the rock. Like Ono's config just would not start up for him, and it was a head scratcher. He was stuck here for multiple days, and finally I guess we figured out what the problem was, that he had reasonably named the chart rock when he installed it, but then the chart makes some assumptions about the names of other resources that are going to be deployed by the chart. And I think there was a config map that got a different name because he renamed the chart. And we have experienced that in our like production deployment too. And so I just override that in the values file. And so he just needed to make a quick change to reflect the name of the chart. But the difficulty was, it's, as far as I can tell, it's not documented anywhere what he needed to do. You could argue that this shouldn't even be the case with the chart, that you would need to like update the values file because you named the chart a particular thing. The chart itself should be smart enough to pick that up and make the changes needed internally. But failing that, it would be good to maybe have some documentation about how to configure the rock helm chart. This seems to be a point of pain that a number of people are having, that the rock helm chart is not well documented, just in terms of
do we know what is wrong with the chart that caused the initial problem, why it is so sensitive to the chart name? I mean, is that a bug that needs to be fixed?
I personally would call it a bug. I don't know the nature of the bug. I haven't looked into it deeply, but I have encountered this exact same thing before and just worked around it.
Yeah, because it does seem like a normal pattern for people to deploy something and do a name override when you deploy it, and it's not working as expected. It needs to be fixed.
Yeah, so maybe there's two issues. There's a bug, and there's also, it could use better documentation in general.
I see Daniel's on the call, I think. Daniel, you out there?
Yeah, I am.
Oh, great. So yeah, sorry for putting words in your mouth.
No, it was great, Andy, and thank you a lot for your help. Yeah, you are right. basically on my side at least, I was missing a lot about the documentation. Basically, I took the draft from Yusum about the SD core and Ether standalone. I don't know if we do have any other type of documentation regarding Ether Rock. I was not able to find it. I can see a lot of flags that I'm disabling right now. I can see it's working, while some stuff I was not able to do yet. But either way, I would really like to know more what each parameter is doing there. Everything that I'm putting as false or true, etc. It would be really nice if possible.
And you're talking about in the values.yaml file specifically?
Yeah.
I wonder, is the usual practice to just heavily comment one's values.yaml, or should there be a separate section in the docs? What have people noticed about the best practice for this?
I think it's often both, that there's like a template values.yaml that has comments, but then also like a table in the README for the
Right.
art that kind of spells it all out.
Yeah, anytime we put something in two places, I know our history has been that they diverge and one of them is wrong. That's why I was
Yeah.
thinking put it in one, but one would be better than zero, and maybe two would be better than one. But maybe if we can at least have someone comment the values.yaml, that would seem like a useful first step.
Yeah, sounds good.
Is there anybody on the, is there anybody
so
on the
who-
call with the right knowledge who could volunteer? Help out?
That's just what I was gonna ask.
I mean,
We're done.
yes, even though I didn't write the chart, I've banged my head against all of these sharp corners enough that I could do that, or take a first stab.
Who did originally write it? Was it Sean? It must, if it's the umbrella
was-
chart.
Yeah, it was Sean.
What I would probably be good for you guys is to test. Probably I'm gonna test a lot with what you guys documented. Okay, this is what I can promise.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
And please bring that feedback back, and also feel free to edit directly as well as you start to gain expertise, Daniel.
Sounds good.
Okay, next item, this performance issue with fragmentation. What's that about?
Should I or you, Ajay?
No, go ahead, Daniel. I think I was not sure that you were there, so I just started it so that all other people are aware about the issue. But yeah, since you are
sounds
here, you
good.
can probably explain. Yeah.
Sounds good. So basically, we are testing Ether and SD core both using a GNodeB and a UE. Okay, a physical UE, a Motorola device. Okay. So we were able to set up and do everything, but when we try to do the iPerf stuff, of course, to check the performance, throughput, we are getting problems with fragmentation. So packages that are higher than 1429, to be honest, from 1429 to up, we are not able to get it working. It is not coming back. Ping are not coming back. iPerf is not working. So we need to set a flag to work with up to 1428. After it, it doesn't work at all. So we are working on it, on testing it. Jay is helping us a lot, and Amar too.
Is there potentially an MTU size issue somewhere in the network where the combination of the packet size plus headers exceeds an MTU?
Yes, this is our initial idea.
Okay.
This is
What's
what
the,
we are. Yes. Yeah, go ahead.
And what G-Node B are you working with?
Base cells.
And is it 5G? Is it really a G-Node B or an E-Node B?
Yeah, it's a 5G and it's not fully compliant, but it's an open RAN G-Node B.
You said G-Node B,
Yeah.
and you said
G-Node B,
bicells?
Bicells, yeah. And to be honest, I have a call in 10 minutes with Denise about it, about the results.
All right. Well, we'll be curious to hear as you make progress. Thank you for reporting it out.
Sounds good.
Okay, moving on to Siva.
Sure. Let me share if you don't mind.
Sure.
All right. Everybody able to see that?
Yep.
All right. So there's been lots of work since the workshop we had a couple of weeks ago, and a number of discussions, and where we tend to be, having the most vigorous discussion is, not surprisingly, the boundary conditions. Where does Ether in a box stop and Ether standalone start? What are all these different conditions and different instantiations? So I think we're fairly settled on the three big boxes: Ether in a box, Ether standalone, and Ether cloud. Ether in a box, I'll cover rather quickly, but essentially it is as we describe it, running on a single device, either with or without radio. So either the RAN simulator or a single radio. And what you'll see in row 9 is really one of the things that we want to get broader coverage on is really what configurations are going to be ONF continually certified. And this is to use the language we have in the marketplace, but I think it's useful language. Say we always have this particular setup running on every build, always continuously testing it, making sure it's working. Third-party qualified is where third parties may be running a similar test suite as we're running, but it's not directly us. And vendor assessed is where they're running a test suite. We're not sure the level of coverage, but they can detail it to say, this is what we did, so that we can understand and the community can understand to what level is this a working configuration. So when we talk about Ether in a box, installed on a single laptop or server, VM, supporting either 4G or 5G, using ROC. Just get to this here. And essentially, we support one 4G or 5G radio in the CBRS spectrum, and this is where we'd expect the community to say, well, we tried something else, we did something else, and the degree to which we decide that's going to be incorporated into our baseline testing is really that's what becomes the roadmap. Our focus here is really easy to install, well documented, supported configurations, document files that don't have little surprises, so that we can ensure there's explicit failure versus it's just not working. That way we can provide good feedback to the user to say, this is the way it's expected to behave. I'll spend a little more time talking about Ether standalone, because I think there was more debate around what are these boundaries, etc. But before any questions regarding Ether in a box before I move on to the next big column. Okay. So Ether standalone is really deploying Ether, including the radio components, within a private network. And this is what a number of users are planning to do with it, are doing with it. And one of the things we where we hit some of those boundary conditions is, the one server Ether standalone with radio. How's that different from Ether in a box? And one of the interesting things that we managed to find here is that the big difference is we're on a CI/CD path that allows graceful movement from left to right, whereas there's lots of shortcuts in the CI/CD arena for Ether in a box in order to make it essentially Ether in a box and simple to install. So the idea here is that there should be a graceful evolution of Ether standalone, whether you start with one Ether standalone with a radio, you go to distributing the control plane, distributing the user plane, the edge cloud, and hardware acceleration should be a continuum that you're always able to move from one to the next. One important distinction here is really that it isn't even though we've shown it sort of as a linear movement from left to right, it doesn't mean that you can't start with the very left point Ether server standalone with radio and then say, yeah, but I really want to try out hardware acceleration, because that's the important factor to me. So the order of operations isn't necessarily limited by us, but certainly it may be a case that, well, we're not testing that regularly. We're not running that through continuous certification. So from that vantage point, there may be more challenges that people hit when you jump to a step, but it's really more of a tree with lots of decision points in it around to what degree are you scaling the control plane, scaling the data plane, scaling and distributing the data plane, and then hardware accelerating the data plane. And those are really the major steps in terms of what are we doing differently for these types of deployments, with the caveat that this is always within a private network. So the goal here is really to identify where do we have differences, what are we going to continually certify, what test setups represent that particular type of configuration. What are the expected performance or scale benefits, so that we can then say, okay, look, this really scales up to a certain level. How many radios will we support? And I think these are I'll call them stake in the sand kind of numbers. That okay, well, we'll put a simple stake in the sand. Others may go well beyond those numbers, and over time we may say, yeah, actually we want to have our own setup that mimics larger configurations, larger distribution, and more capability. Again, essentially, the overall direction here is we're going to increase the ONF certified capabilities over time. So in addition to adding features and functionality, which will be a combination of ONF and the community, there's also going to be a size of configuration distribution, some of which is ONF, some of which is ONF plus the community.
So the standalone, they all came with CI/CD. Do you run that CI/CD from a local node at the edge, or where? I guess I'm wondering where you run that from.
Yeah, so you're running the CI/CD in that private environment. So
okay.
one of the things that we're going to have to address is, now how do we separate the CI/CD that we use versus creating the right set of templates for others to use?
Yeah, I think we've run into exactly the same thing in a few other contexts, is people wanting to do a trial and wanting to, rather than manually sit down and type in bash commands, running a CI/CD, and they don't have that. So
right.
Yeah, that seems like a big component to contribute here.
Yeah, not all of this is sort of hardcore 4G 5G functionality centric. Some of this is going to be about, so how do we create and distribute software in a way that others can install on their own, versus us doing the installation as we had done in sort of the Ether cloud configuration. And that sort of comes back to, okay, now, you know, on the roadmap, what are the near-term items versus what are the midterm and long-term items? Make sense?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. So my ask here, in general, before I jump to Ether Cloud, is comments and questions in this document, so that we can flesh out, okay, where are things correct, incorrect, where have I made, you know, wrong assumptions, and lots of, you know, big thanks to AJ and also Timon and Larry for correcting me in places where I didn't understand how things were done from an ONF perspective, and you know, trying to get it both factually correct as well as now directionally correct of what are we going to do about it. The ONF focus is really I call it a thematic statement, right? What do we want the attributes to be? Again, easy to install, well documented, with straightforward growth from one configuration to another. And the color coding, you know, I think green is something that we've got. Yellow tends to be something that we need to look at and maybe extend, and red is something we're probably not doing today, and definitely need to have roadmap items. And the areas sort of below 24 is very much a work in progress. So I haven't fleshed that out completely. That is part of the work to say, okay, now what's the roadmap? What do we have to do? And then prioritize that. And then also get agreement around the community of, okay, who's going to do that, right? To give you an example, some work in progress, CPU support. We know ARM is working on getting Aether working with the ARM processor, and they've made great progress. We need to help them ensure that they can submit all the changes and keep moving forward. And, you know, as and when other CPU vendors become interested, you know, we should be enabling that, along with a theme here of, you know, how do we get broader community support? When I look at, for example, on the UPF side for Ether standalone with radio and hardware acceleration, Edge Cloud with UPF on P4 compatible hardware forwarding, and you know, we should be engaging additional vendors to provide hardware acceleration as and when there is community interest in it. So a goal here is not to push alternative vendors, but really make sure that if there's interest in other vendors, make sure they're enabled to say, how do you fall under the umbrella of ONF, and that there is an easy path to have alternatives, so that we continue to make sure that the users of ONF see it as open. Any questions regarding Ether standalone before I move to cloud? Okay.
Maybe a question for this community: if these, you know, just even the row 5, if these steps make sense to everybody, you know, or I guess I'm curious that Daniel's on the call, or I see maybe he dropped, so maybe not. I was going to ask him if, you know, where CPQD saw themselves on this path, but you're not here, are you, Daniel?
I think he said he had another call, so.
Yeah, okay. Any other feedback though on the overall?
Happy to take it in real time, and also happy to have you, you know, make comments in the spreadsheet itself, which the link is in the minutes. Okay. If not, just moving to Ether Cloud again. You know, the simplistic difference here is that the core is deployed in a cloud configuration, GCP to start. We should be thinking about extending that to AWS or Microsoft Azure as time goes on. In column J, and you know, what we decide is continually certified should continue to grow with that. Similar scaling mechanisms to the Ether standalone, with radio scaled UPF, deploying it with Edge Cloud, hardware UPF and Edge Cloud. And one critical difference between cloud and standalone, because you're moving from a private to a public network, is, okay, how do you secure the traffic between the cloud and the edge? And, you know, I think certainly that's an area where where many people have asked questions and say, okay, so how is this done right now? The answer is, it's left to the user to figure that out, and we see it somewhat as a transparent underpinning. How you create VPNs or move credentials around. But I think it's also an area that we need to start looking at around Aether Cloud to say, okay, how do you start simplifying this? How do you start creating common behavior around it so that the traffic between the edge sites and the cloud is secure? And that can even apply over multiple edge sites, for that matter, as you look at things like handover or other types of edge-to-edge communications.
I'm a little bit confused about the first two columns in the Aether Cloud section, where we have the cloud but without an edge cloud. Where are you, if not at the edge, where are you installing the radio and the UPF in those two columns?
So I think the difference is the radio is always at the edge.
Right.
I'll say almost by definition. The UPF can be in the cloud or can be at the edge. I think there's always going to be a UPF function at the edge, but whether there's a PNS gateway at the edge or not is the difference between those two columns.
Okay, got it. Yeah, I'm not aware of us having done a UPF that wasn't at the edge, so I don't have the experience with that. But
yeah, and again, I may be drawing a distinction that doesn't really exist, in which case we can simplify things and say it only works one way. So that's valuable feedback. I was looking at it more or less as to, okay, how could these be functionally decomposed? So if it doesn't make sense to ever do it in that way, happy to drop a column.
Yeah, I think AJ would maybe be the one who could best comment on whether the first two columns make sense or not.
Okay. Yeah, and I've been working with AJ and getting his feedback around the decomposition, but we need to circle back around, okay, what combinations make sense or not.
Yeah, so in general, the philosophy was that getting someone started with the Aether Cloud, if we keep even UPF installed in the cloud, that simplifies the thing that just radio exists at the edge. Of course, you will have the limitation in terms of performance. But the moment you bring in the UPF at the edge, people have to bring in the compute server and they have to install the Kubernetes cluster and UPF. So it adds on extra things. So yeah, I mean, it's just one logical state. If somebody is sure that they need even UPF at the edge, yeah, they're free to skip the first stage.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think if it works, I think it's cool to have this cloud UPF option.
We had done this when we were doing the DT trial, and Radis's team was in India and they wanted to test their radio with our core, including UPF. They were not having enough. They had to go through a lot of permissions to install UPF in their infrastructure. So they asked whether can we have the UPF installed in cloud itself. So we had done that. So they had only radio connecting to our whole control as well as user plane. Of course, performance test cannot be done, but we can always do the functional testing. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, but still very cool. So the columns stay. I like them now.
Yeah. Okay. I think as long as we can make a clear and logical explanation as to why it exists. Again, it doesn't mandate that you got to start with step one. You could say, okay, I understand step one, but I'm going to go straight to step two. With the obvious, the obvious caveats of there's lots more that can go wrong. And as I said in here, as we increase the cloud coverage, we also want to make sure that we've got the roadmap around both how things are distributed, as well as now over hardware forwarding as we increase both network scale and network throughput as essentially independent vectors. But from a functional perspective, this will mimic what is done in Aether standalone. Again, with the key caveat that the core is in the cloud versus in the edge.
So Siva, in this set of, I guess I'll call them blueprints, where do you go from single edge to multi-edge?
I think it's the third column. I don't think I necessarily put that into words correctly. Ether cloud with edge cloud is the multi-edge solution. Did I answer your question correctly?
I think you answered. I think maybe you just need to think about it a little bit. I mean, because I guess what you were saying is, column 1 and 2 of Ether cloud section, everything was running in the cloud, if I understood it. Or is number 2 the
No.
UPF running on the edge?
Yes, yes. Number 2 is UPF running in the edge. 3 is multi UPF or multiple edge. 4 is multiple edge with UPF and hardware, and 5 is securing the communications between the edge and the core. I'll take a stab at improving those descriptions so it's clearer.
Yeah, good. That would be helpful. And I'm actually going back to I guess column G, where you have standalone with scaled UPF. I mean, to my knowledge, we never spent a lot of time scaling the software UPF in any of our deployments. We would put multiple UPFs out for use cases. Well, let me think about that. So we have basically a software and a hardware-based UPF and attached use cases to each. I don't think we even ran multiple software UPFs at any edge site. But
Well, we did to the extent that it was one UPF per slice. So if we had more than one slice, we had more than one UPF. But there was never a case where I think a single slice had multiple UPFs in it.
So that might be another tweak in column G to go, instead of calling it scaled UPF, it's basically slicing. Put it all in the context of slicing, and so it's edge sites with multiple slices.
Okay, yeah, that was I can make that change easy enough. But the question I would pose back to the team here is it valuable to be able to have multiple software UPFs per slice?
From a scalability perspective, I think it would be, if you had down there that you were scaling to 100 UEs, I think.
Again, stake in the sand.
Yeah. I mean, you pick a point and, you're probably proposing points to where you may be scaling higher than we did in practice.
Yep.
And you may run into points where the UPF becomes the bottleneck. So that's needs to be experimentally determined, maybe.
Fair. Yeah, I somewhat pick numbers out of the air to say, okay, it's small, medium, and large kind of thing.
Yeah, I think you picked reasonable numbers.
Yeah, and for the life of me, I don't know how we're going to test 100 UEs manually, but that's tomorrow's problem.
And we may have done, AJ or someone may know of people who did scalability tests, and maybe there's some data to help how many UEs a UPF can handle. But it's not something I have direct experience with.
Yep.
Okay. Well, we did it with simulation, I believe. Right?
Yeah.
But never with a big physical network. But I also don't think we ever, I don't know, Siva, if we even have. If anybody's ever configured it up so that within one slice, you can have multiple UPFs to divide the traffic up. I mean, I think that our architectural framework and model would be to slice that apart somehow, separate edges or separate slices. So, you might be touching into something that requires kind of an architectural or, architect probably overstating it, but it's a kind of different way of thinking about.
Certainly a design change of how are UEs mapped to UPFs.
Exactly. Yeah.
How that is done. Where today it could be based on a slice, but if your slice exceeded the capacity, then the decision I think we have to make in terms of the roadmap is would we be willing to say hey, look, we got to figure out a software way to split UPF so that you can map UEs to multiple software UPFs? Or would the next step just be, sorry, you got to go to hardware if it's not enough?
And the other thing you can do is you could cheat and you could just split, you could take one slice and turn it into 2 slices. And
Yeah.
then put half the UEs in each one. But that's kind of cheating. You don't want to have to make the user micromanage it to that point if you can avoid it.
It is and it isn't. I also think there's a certain value for us in having I'll say simple and straightforward path forward versus you can do anything and any combination of stuff is possible. Guidance around no, that's not a path. It's okay. Now, if the community came back and said, but we got to have it done this way for some legitimate reason, there's no reason we couldn't put it on the path and say, okay, yeah, I guess we got to figure out that problem.
Yep.
I'm trying to bound it a little bit with what are realistic deployment scenarios. Okay. Don't think there's a lot of value in going with in delving into a lot of the details on the Aether cloud side, because again, I think there's a lot of development items that come up here. I think how we do the CI/CD and test, how that's run by the users in their own cloud environment versus what we had developed for ONF.
Siva,
Yeah.
I'm wondering, just time management wise, if we should pop up and just get through the rest of the agenda first too, because there's a lot of detail in here we could wind up.
Yeah, in fact, what I was going to say is happy to take comments on this offline so that we, I'm not trying to delve into all of these details here. So you can get a good sense of what's there, but I guess what I'm looking for is any feedback from the TST specifically, and your knowledge of the architecture of Aether as to whether there are issues, questions, or thoughts about how it could be structured differently.
I think just as a general observation, this seems well thought out, well structured to me, and you just see what happens when you start hitting reality with it, whether it works. But it seems good. Okay,
I'll leave it to the team to provide comments offline, and turn it back to you, sir.
Sure. Let me get the meeting notes back up. There we go. Let's see. Next up was open sourcing the CI/CD system.
Yeah, so I saw this question, and so I typed the answer, which the short answer is no, we haven't open sourced it as far as I know. There's 2 relevant repositories, Aether pod configs, which is Terraform configurations, and they're used to set up the cluster and the infrastructure, such as the VPNs and the routing between clusters. And then there's the Aether app configs, which is Fleet configs, and those are used to install the Helm charts. So they're not open sourced. You might want to audit them and just see how generally applicable they would be for the user community, to just pick up and understand and apply, and also maybe scrub some ONF credentials out of there before we open source those.
Yeah, I wonder if you just want to make whole new repos that just have a single, fake configuration in each one, because these are all full of deployment specific parameters, right? I mean, they're all for specific edge sites.
Yeah, it's what we use to deploy our sites.
So Larry here, but they are useful examples, 1. And 2, is it the case they're not open source, but if you have a login, you can get to them?
Yeah, ONF, I'm not sure if ONF members can access them or not, but maybe.
I don't believe they can. Also, they contain a bunch of passwords and other.
But passwords for stuff that doesn't run anymore. Or not.
I think they're still used.
Okay.
So there is a migration of Pronto sites that is supposed to occur to Intel infrastructure that has not been done, and it probably means this is still used then. That's what you're referring to, that's still in use?
Yeah, until we migrate that stuff, then I think these are still active credentials that are used in our current deployment.
Right. So do we have a way to move forward on, I mean, it doesn't seem like you can sanitize it while it's in active use. It seems like this can't be open source until we've migrated the infrastructure, which is kind of on us.
Yeah.
That becomes a work item we've got to tackle.
Yeah.
My understanding is that the plan is to start making progress on that maybe next week.
Okay, that sounds good. So by the time we have our next TST meeting, we can discuss the progress that has been made.
Yeah, I think so.
Next up, we've got roadmap document. Oh, Scott to start to fill out. All right, we've got an empty roadmap document.
This was just pulled up from, I don't know how long ago, 8 weeks ago or so. We said we would just kind of open up a, but I mean, the higher level question too is, is a Google Doc the right place to be putting it, or, or maybe the higher level question is, how do we establish a roadmap? How do we start, thinking, more forward?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I'm the type of person that likes Google Docs instead of Jira, but I know other people have a different view of tools. So I'm open to whatever anybody wants to do with it. And then I would think, as far as filling it out, we just iterate through it during these meetings, as well as the people here.
Yeah, I think there's two ways I would tackle this. One, I think we need to create I'll call it a roadmap backlog. What are all the specific development items that we want to tackle? And then begin to prioritize them and group them into relevant releases to say, okay, we're going to tackle this subset as as one set of deliverables, or one deliverable, and the rest move to the next.
Yeah.
I think from the mechanics of it, I'm quite happy to manage that in Google Docs. I do think it is helpful to have a Jira ID mapping so that we don't get any confusion with respect to just language of, well, I thought that was item, this item, but it's some other item. It's helpful to have the IDs in there and say, what are we delivering against? And that also, to me, that also helps tie together things like, where's the automated testing coming from and against which particular features and so on. So I do see the value in Jira in it, but I think there has to be a link between a document and the underlying tools like Jira.
Yeah, that sounds good. Sometimes the way we've occasionally done it in the past is, we'd put high level points in the document, you turn those into epics.
Yeah.
And then, maybe the tasks and stories only live in Jira and don't make the document. But I think there's multiple sane ways of approaching that. So, but
yeah,
ONF,
it sounds like what you're describing, makes a lot of sense, that you've got a high level capture of it so that there's some sense of what it is with the IDs to dive deeper, but a lot of the details are down in Jira.
So TST would own the Google Doc, and ONF would own the Jira. Is that kind of how we would break this up?
I think I think TST owns the doc, and I think it also owns the Jira Epics, regardless of who is the contributing
Right.
organization or person.
Owns the Google Doc.
And
And
I
the
don't know if
Jira.
there are tool limitations there, but we absolutely have to be able to collect development, but both within ONF and more importantly in the community at large.
Right. I guess I'm just thinking, who is managing the Jira boards, and it's probably not any of us that moved to Intel that would have time to manage the Jira boards. That is something you would be managing at ONF.
I would say so in the absence of any better answer.
Okay. Okay. Good.
Is there an existing backlog?
In Jira, I assume this was Zach that was typing up here that the current Jira is probably full of landmines ready to explode.
Yeah, actually, I didn't observe that. I was asking just generally, is there, do we have an existing backlog in Jira and Google Docs and other places?
Jira, it is there. So I think, yeah.
Let me take the action to go look at what's in Jira right now and try to make sense of that and come back and lay out what the next steps are around the roadmap, as not just in terms of content, but also how we manage it.
That sounds good. Ready to move on. Looks like we've got an Ether in a box verification test script. That sounds very useful. Who wants to discuss that?
Hi, this is Amol. So last TST meeting, we talked about this verification test, whether the nodes or pods from the pods, is it accessible? So I created a small test, ping test to test the pods from the node as well as the services. And one of the tests, third test, that is from one of the pod, and from pod to the services, what are the services it can be accessible to, or whether the port is open or not. Or so the doc contains the output of that script. So the script I have written in Python 2.7, which I have used the command module, which is not supported in Python 3+. So so if this looks okay to the TST, then I can make this more formal way, which can support Python 3+ also. So let me know.
Yeah, sort of the high level point I would have is to, color failures so they stand out, and also, make sure we know whether failures are important or not. If maybe it's the case that things shouldn't be able to talk to one another, and some of these failures are like not actually an error, but expected failures. I'm
Not a test case failure.
right.
Sure.
But yeah,
sure.
this looks useful to me. What do you think of it? For example, Andy, I think you've maybe thought about diagnostic testing stuff in the past. Does it look like what you would expect as well?
Yeah, I mean, I would have to maybe take a closer look, but it looks at a high level like what could be useful. I mean, I think it's only a limited utility in Ether in a box, because that pretty much is going to work. But like when we start getting out to other environments, like on real hardware, then I think that might be where it is useful.
Yeah, right.
I would just have a question on the Python 2.7. I mean, that's very deprecated now at this stage. It's not installed.
Yeah, that I can write it for Python 3. That's not an issue. I just
Right.
need to understand whether it is suitable or it is okay to go forward and make it little bit more formal way than this. This is just a raw script.
Yeah, it looks useful.
Maybe Amol, whatever you said verbally, right? Can you add those things line on the top of that file, which says that what is AIM and how it's going to be useful and who can use it and when they can use it. So that will really help in terms of accessing the usefulness of that script.
Okay, sure, that I can do that.
Yeah.
I guess I was imagining this becomes part of the documented installation process.
Yes,
Is it
yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
So
sure, I can do that.
Which of course will inevitably lead to needing to support Python 3x versus 2.7.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, sounds good. And thanks for working on that. Next up, we have either community. Yeah, so we are at time. I'm available to go a little bit longer, I think, but you know, anyone else you need to drop, feel free to drop. But either community calls. Let's talk about that.
So,
yeah.
Eric,
So
do you want to?
Actually, I'm saying I have to drop, so I'm going to have to drop, even though I put this on here. But I think it sounds like Amol's ready to step in. So, sorry,
Okay.
and take over.
Okay, so we have identified the first presenter. So he's going to present his deployment experience. So the tentative agenda for the community call is like first one opening, like marketing, what the Aether in a box, what is Aether, and then we will go a little bit about the architecture of the Aether, so that the new members that going to attend this community call, they will understand what exactly the Aether in a box or Aether is. And then the next half an hour is about experience. So the flow will be like explaining about the Aether and then the case study about the Aether. So that was the tentative agenda that I have designed it. Means let me know if any suggestions are welcome, if I need to add or I need to drop anything. So within next 2 to 3 days, I'm going to send the invitations to many like TST members. I'm also trying to search the university labs who might be interested to join this call. So I'm in the search for that too. So the invitation will have like a registration form where you can specify the name as well as the university or the organization, so that in future, if Eric want to talk to them, maybe there is a possibility that they can be a member or not. So that's kind of information we can get from the registration form and the Zoom link.
So Amol, this is Denise. I suggest maybe we work together on sending out that invite. We actually have a
Sure.
marketing Zoom specifically for webinars, and it's kind of set up. So as opposed to using your personal, ONF Zoom, we have a marketing one. It can handle like 100, a couple hundred participants, and it has some, facilities for registration as well. So maybe we should work together on getting that out. It doesn't have to all be on you, and we can also promote this like in the ONF newsletter. We just need to give people about 2 weeks notice. So when we set the date, we should keep that in mind, as well as we should consider the time, for different geographies.
So the initial plan is like 8 o'clock morning, San Francisco, 8 o'clock morning, which is like last time I made, which is like 5 o'clock in the European Central Time.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, so
that works.
Yeah, that will work. I think most of us, means considering only US and Europe.
Right.
For Asia, it will be little night.
Yeah.
But what I came to know is that we have to concentrate on, means
Right.
there are many members from then, and obviously I'll require your help to send out the invitations and arrange those things. So I'm planning to send you the email
Okay.
today.
Okay, that's great. And then we'll work together on setting that up and publicizing it. Because
Sure,
we'll use
sure.
social media, we'll use the newsletter, we'll send this to a broader community as possible.
Yeah, that will be great. So any suggestions regarding the tentative agenda that I have designed?
Will you be able to record it if we're not able to make it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure, sure. We will
Okay, great.
record it.
Yeah,
And
we'll
then how frequent is this gonna be? Is this like monthly or a couple times a month or?
Initial plan is like twice in a means bi-weekly,
Okay,
but
cool.
I'm not sure yet.
I think you and Denise should discuss frequency. I'd rather go less frequent as a start and increase it if demand's there versus canceling because we don't have presenters.
I
Right.
agree.
I agree.
So the next point is Aether in a box on the Mac M1. So as per Kyle's instruction, I have created the container. I haven't deployed yet, but yeah. So the progress is whatever the container he has created on the ARM processor. I have created the same containers on my MacBook Pro M1. But I haven't deployed it and tested it. So another question regarding that, if we want to run the CI/CD pipeline, which he has requested, then we need to have infrastructure for that. So what is the what is the means? Obviously, on this call there will not be any member from the ARM or something, but
There is work directly with ARM right now in porting to the ARM architecture. I'll get you plugged into that discussion. So, but I think we've got to drive the CI/CD piece of it.
yeah, so CI/CD piece of it, we need an infrastructure to test it that we have to arrange. That's
I'll get you plugged in with the folks from ARM.
okay.
Just on the subject of the Mac M1, I think there is a layer in the Mac OS that is allowing x86 Docker containers to run on ARM. That wouldn't be there on an ARM server. So I'm not really sure just that you can run it on an M1 means that it'll run on an ARM server.
Yeah, I means I don't have a idea about it, but I'll go deep into it and I can reply you on that in future.
Okay.
Yeah, like I said, I think the discussion with the ARM folks and what specific hardware they're testing it on. I don't remember the code names for the processors they were doing, but it's not necessarily a Mac variant.
Yeah, basically means as per my understanding, we are why we are targeting on M1 because M1 is like Aether in a box. Basically, people install it on the laptop, and most of the users buy Apple M1 processor. So that's the consideration that I understood. I might be wrong.
We just have to make sure that's synchronized with what ARM is doing what ARM is doing to extend support
Yeah,
to their
sure.
instruction set architecture.
Yes. Yeah, that's it for me from my side regarding Mac M1.
Okay, thank you. 5G small cell compatibility. Whose item is this one?
Maybe we can take it next time. I think Timon must have added that.
Okay,
Yeah, there was a long email thread, but I think Timon and AJ were on it, and I was copied on it. But just understanding the SIM card readers they're providing the 5G radio. It'd be good to get an update on that.
okay. And then we had two other items that I added that I think the Krim had asked me to add. So one of them is online charging requirement.
Yeah, so recently we received 2 requests for online charging requirement, and for both customers they raise it as a blocking for Aether acceptance. So I will just like to raise it whether we should consider this into our roadmap immediately, or any thoughts on this? So we did some preliminary study on adding this. There is no very clear definition from specification point of view. So there are 2 things we need. One is maybe we will need a champion customer wherein they can provide OCS and other infrastructure to test online charging, and maybe we will need some help from architects from ONF who already has prior experience of online charging.
Yeah, it sounds like that's probably your biggest challenge, is just to find the people you'll need to implement the feature. I have no familiarity with it myself. AJ, did we ever consider charging in the context of either when we were back at ONF?
Yeah, our mostly focus was on the private LTE or private 5G, where charging was not important. But I think the conversation is coming from some operators who have like small deployment, and they definitely need the charging support to charge their customers, right? So they are probably not going to use it as a private LTE, but they are going to use it as a commercial deployment on the commercial license. And since they are going to deploy it there, they naturally need this kind of support, right? So yeah, I mean, these kind of supports, or it's not going to just stop at online charging. They might come back with some LI and so many other things which needs the commercial deployment, needs a lot of compliance. So yeah, and of course it requires, since this feature doesn't exist, right? It requires a lot of effort as well. Yeah, I mean, if somebody is doing it, and yeah, and why not? And if it's getting done and if that makes it useful for the commercial deployment, yeah, I mean, definitely it should be done. But it all depends on how much time and what kind of support you're expecting. Yeah.
Vikram, was it you that raised this issue?
Yes, it's Vikram.
Yeah. Shoot me an email. Let's discuss further, because I think, as AJ said, this starts to push us in a very different direction in terms of public network support. And AJ mentioned, like some big ticket items like lawful intercept, and where that ends up getting done. And I've got no problems with somebody who wants to make those changes into the code base and submit them in. I do have some angst over, do we go and do that from an ONF perspective? Because it does seem to be pushing us outside of our direction. But let's you and I talk about it so we can understand better.
Yeah, sure. So previously, actually, we deferred this requirement with the same thought. Yeah, we have actually two requests, and both are just blocked on this. So as I said, in case we are actually going to talk to one of the customers to kind of champion for this feature development. And from what we look, I think we will need some help from some architecture or prior experience anyone has in online charging, because there is no clear requirements from specification point of view. So in case we want to contribute or develop this, I think we will need some help from community who has the prior experience. We can discuss in detail, and I will just give you more insights on how we are just going to tackle this.
Yep, and feel free to bring me in any discussions you feel necessary.
Yeah, sure.
Thanks.
So fine. I think then let me just message you offline.
That's fine. Yep.
Okay, sounds good. And then the final issue is the 4 megabyte gRPC limit reported by Amit. Where did we hit this limit?
Yes, but so we wanted to onboard the scenes, and so we kind of created a patch. So when we onboarded around 900 SIMs, so it does include the enterprise, single enterprise and the single site. Okay. So that's where it's failing. Like earlier, it used to fail at 2,500 around SIMs plus the devices in single enterprise and single site. So now it's stuck to less than 1,000. That's where we are seeing an error. So we reported it. Sean analyzed it, and he thinks it's a complex fix, and maybe we need to fix it in Atomics. That's where we don't have an expertise, right? So that's where we need help to increase the size.
Yeah, that's a good summary of it. Yeah, so I brought it up inside Intel, and Thomas and Jordan and Adib looked at it, and we concluded that basically the interface to the Atomics store has to be changed so that basically you can use chunking. Well, there's two ways to go about it, I guess. You can change a configuration parameter to up the limit on that message size, and I'm not sure where that is at the moment, but that would look like an immediate solution. And then the longer term solution would be that Atomics should accept message chunking, that large messages like this can be broken up into small chunks. This is also something that's going to be needed, I think, in ST Fabric and in One Intel Edge as well, because inevitably we're going to come across these limits. So where we're at the moment is Thomas is going to bring together some people to talk about this and what the best way to solve it is. But I think two solutions at the moment. One is to change that limit on the gRPC. And what would you change it to? I guess doubling it is probably a good idea. It seems to be based on the size of the configuration, not just on the change you're currently making. So it's like if you add 2,500 and then you add a subsequent, and that's at the limit, and then you add a subsequent one, you know, it's going to break it.
Yeah, we tried that, like one by one also, we reached around 800 and then one by one. So that's not an issue. It's a complete config size. That's the issue.
Yeah, and I mean the other suggestion I had was that maybe you could consider breaking up your configuration into a number of enterprises. That might not be a possibility for you, but
So that's not a possibility for us. It is having only one enterprise. So only so we are in a phase like time is crunch for us, right?
Right.
So even if there is a workaround, right, to increase the size limit, it will be acceptable for us now for the time being, right?
Yeah. Okay, so I will try and find from Jordan and Thomas exactly where that configuration parameter might be.
We tried to check on the gRPC library, and we found that limit there. The Golang gRPC library. We tried to change that, but it didn't reflect. So that's the only thing we tried.
I see. Okay. Yeah, I mean, most of us are in the same position as you, that we don't have, you know, the knowledge of atomics. Really, that's something that's maybe Jordan and Adib really are the ones who know this the best. So yeah, we'll circle around on the Intel forum and try and get an answer for you as soon as possible on increasing that limit.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, I have a feeling we're going to start running into this all over the place at Intel. as we move forward. So we all have an interest in fixing this bug. Yeah. So we'll learn more about it internally. So we're about 20 minutes over and we're at the end of the agenda. I move that we adjourn. Does anyone else have anything you'd like to discuss before we call it a day?
Hey, Scott, this is Denise. I have a quick one. I was
Sure.
actually just on a call with CPQD, Daniel Pfefferman. I think he was on the call at the beginning of this call, and unfortunately our meeting went in the middle of this call. But anyway,
Right.
One of the things we talked about is he would like to come and present in this forum their test results with BiCells, their Genode B at the next meeting, which looks to be September 20th. And so I wanted to ask if we could put that on the agenda, and maybe you or someone should communicate to him kind of, expectations as to how much time he might have to do that.
Sure.
But he would like to do that and, talk about what they're doing. Do you have his email, or do you need me to send that to you?
Yeah, send it along to me. I don't know if I have it on hand. That'll make sure I have it.
Okay, fantastic.
Do we want to give him like half the session, like 30 minutes?
You usually have a pretty full agenda, so that's
I know, yeah.
bring it up and suggest that you probably want to give him a time frame.
Okay, let's tell him he has 15 minutes ish then.
Yeah, and it might go to 20, but yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I will do that, and I'll copy you on it as well, Scott, and let him know that
Okay.
he's on the agenda.
And this was from Daniel.
Right.
Sounds good. Yeah, I guess the hope is that our agenda gets less packed as we knock down more stuff, but it was a pretty packed one today. All right. Okay, well, thank you everyone, and I will talk to you later.
All right, thank you.
Thanks for handling all the items. Appreciate it. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye all.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.